Hello and welcome to another episode of the Femininja Project. And thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And I have a very exciting guest with me today. He's got an incredibly powerful message to share with us. His name is Thomas Brown. He is an author, cyclist, mental health advocate, and founder of Rise, Revolution Inspired Self Evolution. Thomas's journey began when he lost his brother to suicide in 2001. 11 years later, along with a friend who also lost a brother to suicide, he set out on a cross country bicycle tour for suicide awareness and the healing power of art. He is the host of the Inner Monologue podcast and author of the book titled 2012 A Bicycle Odyssey, which tells the story of his cross country adventure. Thomas, first of all, thank you so much for being here. And I am so, so sorry about your brother.
Thank you, Cheryl. I'm very happy to be a part of this show. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for the kind words. Yeah, I hear that from people a lot, and I just try to like let them know that it was part of my journey. And I think you'll find in our conversation that um, what I found at the end of my bike ride, I wouldn't have found if my brother hadn't have done what he did back in August of 2001. So it's
So
it's
I'm
it, it's if some supreme being came down and told me to choose between one or the other, like I don't know if I could go back to the life that I had. So
okay. So let's just start there. What was your life like, and what were you doing, and how are things
I was
going?
well when my brother died, I was pretty lost. I was dealing with my own mental health issues, very lacked confidence. I think that my cross to bear was I was extremely codependent, and I would be codependent. It didn't even matter if you were a healthy person or not. Um, if you were really good at BSing, your way through things, then that was good enough for me. And I because of that codependency, I always had these aspirations um to do a lot of like wild things in my life, but I was too afraid to go out and do it on my own, and I wanted my friends or my primary friend, my best friend at the time, to like go with me. And I just like it just never worked out, and I always made excuses to not do it, and it was all it really was just like fear and anxiety. I'd like to say that like my brother's suicide was the thing that like put me over the edge, but it was, like I was already pretty lost, and that just kind of like propelled me even further. There was some anger that came up with my brother's suicide. I wouldn't really say resentment. Um, like it was shocking, but not surprising.
Mm,
um my brother was a very dominant person. He kind of controlled the household, the family, even though he was a child. My parents are from a very simple time and place, and when I say simple time, I'm talking about technologically. They come from a small town in southern Kansas,
mm,
and as technology just started to grow exponentially over the last, from like from the 60s to the 80s to the 90s. Like, my brother and I we were latchkey kids that were, um, grew up with this, uh, an explosion of technology. So video games, the internet
mm,
came out when I was a senior in high school, and it's just we had just had more access to information than
mm-hmm,
my parents did. And my brother was a very charming person, and he kind of was the person that like fixed things around the house. So he kind of like had this air of like, I'm in charge around here, even though this is like mom and dad. And I didn't really dig that vibe and that attitude from him.
mm-hmm,
um I think what killed him was a lack of self-awareness, a
mm-hmm,
lack of acceptance of who he was. He bought into the idea of what it is to be a man, the like the patriarchal understanding of manhood, and part of that was how many um, how many women you'd been with. And so
Mm-hmm.
at the time that he had died, he was in a relationship with two women for 10 years, and they probably like 4 or 5 months previous before that, uh, they they both got wise and told him, that they were done with him. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that my brother had the courage to just admit that he was sad and that he was depressed and that he was upset, because his entire reality shifted and was taken and taken from him rightfully, and he just freaked out.
Mm-hmm.
He completely freaked out, didn't know how to handle it. So I'd always been the type of person where I was always fine expressing my emotions. I was a very emotional kid. Um, but I just, for some reason, and even though like my friends are my friendship group, we were all pretty toxic, unwise, unintelligent, didn't have any of the tools to manage our own mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Even though they were very kind and loving and listening to me when I would, be upset about something, I would never just come out and say like, "Oh, I'm depressed and I probably need professional help."
Mm-hmm.
I would just never do that, you know? So even though I was
Did you
willing to talk about it,
did
it took me. Go ahead.
no, did you know that you were depressed? Or did you just think something was a little bit off?
I just was like, "Hey, man, I'm sad a lot. Like, just things are
Uh,
life is difficult and hard, and
mm-hmm.
this must be how most people feel."
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until um years later, like around 2008, I was in a really bad um intimate relationship with a woman, and I often say that like my relationship with her, I felt like I was dating my brother because she was just as bad as he was.
Wow.
And I realized, like, I was like, why can't I get away from this woman? Why can't I, like, why this is
Mm-hmm.
obviously toxic for me? Why can't I get away? And that's when I sought professional help.
Mm-hmm.
And that was probably like one of the like that really helped, because Kim, my my teacher, I just call her my teacher, she really like shredded the onion, all the layers of within me, and really helped me, and opened me up to like the concept that I think that is prevalent in my book, is just like the importance of self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
um and self-awareness, not only like who are you outside of the society and all the society's like rules that dictate
Mm-hmm.
who you should be. um and that was really the start. It was 2 years with Kim before the idea of the bike ride came up.
Mm-hmm.
So
So I
I
just did want
she's
to
a catalyst.
mention something or ask this
Hmm.
question because you talk about self-awareness and we talk about that a lot on the show because it is so important. And your lack of self-awareness, and you had said that you and your brother grew up at this technological boom and you were, video games and stuff. Do you think that that's part of what dulled your own awareness or your ability to understand what was going on around you? Because, when you live in that digital world for a while, even if it's just for entertainment, it kind of puts a different kind of a perspective on things and not always
I
positive.
I will never blame technology. I think technology, like power, reveals who you truly are. It
Mm-hmm.
reveals like your worst characteristics.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I would say that like self-awareness is the only game in town. I don't
Mm-hmm.
care what your political affiliation or what like religion you believe in. If you don't have a practice of understanding who you are, then you're you're in trouble. You're pretty much uh, wide open for manipulation at that
Mm-hmm.
point in time. And to me, I really think that it wasn't the technology. It was just the like, there's really only two ways that people come. Let me start all over. And that isn't for an edit. That's just I want to be able to like give you my primary thoughts. Self-awareness is like any other skill set that one can uh either cultivate or you're born with. Some people
Mhm.
are born and they can just jump out of the stadium. Some
Mhm.
people, like when they're born, they see a piano or a guitar and they can just play it. You
Mhm.
know, it just makes sense to them. Some people are born and they are phenomenal writers. Some people are born with a great sense of self.
Mhm.
But that just doesn't mean that you can't cultivate that. And
Mhm.
so unfortunately, the only two ways people usually cultivate that or start a journey, if it's not intrinsically a part of their being,
Mhm.
is there's two paths. One path is you suffer a trauma
Mhm.
and you find yourself in like therapy, or you're introduced to like some spiritual path that like promotes the idea of the self, or you're desperate for a humanities credit for that for the degree that you're going for, and you just like,
Mhm.
oh, I'll take something simple, so you wind up in a philosophy class or a mythology class, and then you just like, and then it just kind of sticks and you're like, wow, this is all by chance, but I'm really into it now. There's there I Back in my early 20s, even before my brother died, I would have thought, back in my tin hat wearing days, I would have thought that like something, a society that didn't promote self-awareness was a nefarious act. But like as I'm older, I think it's more of the fact that it's just negligence.
Mhm.
I think um, the powers that be, the people that are in places of power, um, that it's all more about self-determination for a lot of them, and
Mhm.
how much power can get. And even though that in itself seems nefarious, I think
Mhm.
it's more born out of negligence
Mhm.
of thinking about the greater community.
Mhm.
And just imagine what a society would be like that if there was like a class that started in first grade for all public schools, um, that was just like arithmetic and science and humanities and all that, that like each year you took another course of
Mhm.
there's it's just, you could learn different meditation practices, you could learn different types of like therapeutic processing, like whether it's movement or art or music, or I just to me, self-awareness is the only game in town, and we just live in a society that doesn't promote it. It doesn't care about cultivating
Mhm.
it, and doesn't care about you know I just think of like how many, where I would be now if I
Mhm.
had something like that when I
Mhm.
started public school.
I think we're actually born with that sense of self-awareness. And as we're, in those developmental years, as baby toddlers, tiny children, because everything's all about us, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And our playmates or our sibs or whatever, whoever we associate with. And it's once we get into school that we're a little bit more conditioned to do what we're told without question, and it's almost like that self-awareness starts to fade away a little bit.
Well, I would even say that like self-awareness is like there's probably more steps than this, but in like my feeble attempt to understand all aspects of awareness, is that there's like three phases of awareness. Like I
Mhm.
just rather, even though I've been calling it self-awareness, so I'm just all about awareness.
Mhm.
And that first step is like self-awareness, and but like once you start to understand a little bit more of who you are, you start to pay attention to your surroundings. Is that where you get
Mhm.
like you know um s- um excuse me, just environmental awareness. And
Mhm.
with your environment comes like not only like the, you know you're not tripping over things, but you start to understand the people that you work
Mhm.
with or that you see on a regular
Mhm.
basis. And from that you start to like really cultivate, if you've got good character, you start to cultivate empathy
Mhm.
and compassion. I mean, you need empathy and compassion for self-awareness, especially if you're going through stuff too. So once you cultivate it for yourself, you can cultivate it for others, and then you go
Mhm.
step into like a third level of awareness, which I call social awareness. And that's
Mhm.
where we start to become a little bit more aware of other people that are in completely different um, situations than us. I'm a
Mhm.
heterosexual white male.
Mhm.
That's my filtration system in which
Mhm.
I operate and view the world, and the world operates and views me. And I think it's important to be able to, like, you know expand your awareness and your empathy as far as you can without learned experience. Like, I'll
Mhm.
never know what it's like to be a woman. I'll never know
Mhm.
what it's like to be a person of color. I'll never
Mhm.
know what it's like to be of different sexual orientation. Like,
Mhm.
so it's important through like expanding your awareness to expand um the plight of your brothers, sisters, and siblings of other persuasions
Mhm.
across the board.
So basically, you're talking about a compassionate heart.
I guess.
Mhm. I just said that 'cause we call that's what part of our characteristics of the martial art that I study is, that a warrior has a compassionate heart, loves peace and harmony.
Hmm. Yeah, I like that.
Well, it's a
See?
lot more comfortable than chaos and rioting and hatred. So
Yeah,
I like that
totally.
too.
Yeah, yeah. But I think, like, the ultimate idea of a compassionate heart, like, and I don't say that you have to have a rough time,
Hmm.
but a true warrior that has a compassionate heart, um, damn mustache. Um,
Yeah, I have
uh,
that problem too.
I think the only, like, to have, like, that compassionate heart is that, like, you've been in the muck, you know? So that's the reason why you try to create a world without chaos and without strife,
Hmm.
so that um you can really, like, you can express that compassionate heart. Like,
Hmm.
even like with where I work at, like, the people that have done the work that
Hmm.
you work with, and the people who haven't.
Hmm.
I tend to laugh more at the chaos that happens at work.
Hmm.
Like, I'll get frustrated from time to time, but never on the level that, like, my coworkers do.
Hmm.
I kind of, like, tend to, like, laugh it off and be like, well, what did you expect? This is kind of
Hmm.
like the MO of the people in charge, the policymakers. So
Hmm.
you just gotta, like, do what you gotta do to get through it, or we go
Hmm.
somewhere else. So
I think when I don't want to use the term hit rock bottom, but when you do experience something that does pull the rug out from underneath you and you feel like you are falling through that rabbit hole, once you have that type of experience and come back from it, it puts everything else in a different light, a different perspective. Things that you would get upset about are now like, really, this is nothing compared to what I've been through.
yeah, yeah, I totally agree to that.
Yeah.
Um, it's almost like I hate to say it. I hate to say that, like, it definitively, you have to go through that rock bottom. Uh, but it helps. It doesn't help at the time that you go through it, but if you can make it out the other side, it just
Hmm.
gives you a very dramatic perspective of the
Hmm.
world. Hopefully for the better. Hopefully it doesn't turn you into a victim.
That's that's a very good point because a lot of people can develop that victim mentality, and I think sometimes it might even be because the people around them who are trying to help them actually reinforce it, not intentionally, but I heard that a lot when I was traumatized and going through my little recovery process. And it was like, well, you're a victim, you've been victimized. And I'm like, I found something incredible during that time. Once I was, coming out of it, it was like, wow, I make a really poor victim. And I think
well,
that's my superpower.
well, I mean, I just having that awareness, because, like, that's the way I kind of, like, bring it up. You're either going, you have an experience, right? And our
Hmm.
ego needs to, like, classify it
Hmm.
as a positive or negative. All right. And so the universe doesn't care about your feelings. It's a continuous process. And I don't mean that to be, like, negative or anything,
Hmm.
but you have this experience, And so over time, because a lot of over time, I have an amendment to this. So let me just get this out first. Over time, you can once you get through it, I'm either going to be a victim of this or I'm going to be a student of this. You
Mhm.
know, a victim is like, is weighed down by the situation. They can't get past
Mhm.
it. A student is asking, why did this happen? And what is the value of this that I could take? Where's because that's where the alchemy works. You know what I mean? That's where you take the lead and you turn it into gold. All
Mhm.
right. It's for your soul, your experience, your character being that, like, do you want it to stay lead or do you want it to turn it into gold?
Mhm.
But my amendment that I want to add to it, because like you see a lot of like these wellness influencers on social media that like I just rail against constantly, is that they tell you like, oh, it's just a choice, it's just a choice. And they're not wrong. Technically they're not wrong, but they never give you the fine print. They
Mhm.
never read the fine print. The journey to get to that choice could be epic. It
Mhm.
could be its own odyssey. You could be going for years going through that journey before you understand that you can make it a choice. And I think that's when you decide to be the student.
Mhm.
But make no mistake, you're still now you're on once you've suffered this trauma, or you've had this, like, what your ego needs to call negative experience. Your processing time is that journey. Like
Mhm.
however long it takes you to process that before you can get to the point from victim to student. So I think
Mhm.
it's very important that, like, although it may be just a choice, the journey to get to that choice is an epic one.
So would you say that that was your moment going from, victim to student was the bicycle journey?
I would say that, like, it probably happened partially during my time with Kim.
Mhm.
But then the bike ride was more of like a symptom of me becoming a student.
Mhm.
Like when we started on the bike ride, I had already accepted wholeheartedly my brother's decision and
Mhm.
what it had done to me. I didn't look at it as like good or bad. I looked at it as that it just was. That
Mhm.
was my life. This was like, now what am I going to do with it? And what Zach and I, as a team, decided to do with that experience is learn from others. Like, we know our experience, we know
Mhm.
what we had to do and what we went through and what our families went through,
Mhm.
or what our families weren't allowing themselves to go through. So
Mhm.
we wanted to learn from other people. So that's really what the bike ride was about, was meeting with other people that had similar experience and learning from them. And I got to tell you, in the beginning, it's still taking me. I feel like this rise philosophy that I have is 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 still a work in progress, and I think it always will be.
Mhm.
Hopefully one of these days I'll do a follow-up to the book 2012, and it will be more of a philosophical book, and
Mhm.
somebody can take that and expand on it long after I've left this planet.
Mhm.
Because I don't really feel like it belongs to me. It's like just like I wasn't the one who came up with the concept of self-awareness, and I think revolution inspired self-evolution is just a really pretentious way of saying know thyself.
Mhm.
But it had a it had a ring to it.
I was just gonna say it really has a nice tone or a nice ring to it. It's very catchy, so I
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that. I like it a
yeah,
lot.
yeah. So,
Now,
but
were you a cyclist before you guys decided to do this, or did you
no,
just like, oh my
I,
goodness, really?
Zach he was somewhat of a cyclist. I originally wanted to walk because I had done a
Huh.
walk um, in 2006 with a group of people from Phoenix to Washington, D.C.
Oh,
Um, yeah, it was a group of progressive Christians. I myself am not a Christian, but it was my parents' church, and I needed to do something to shake up my life. I was
mhm,
still dating that woman, but I left on this walk, and when I came back, I probably should have ended the relationship.
uh-huh,
I did start on the path of like starting to like do things for myself.
mhm,
I'd gotten rid of most of the toxic friends, or at least just didn't associate with them anymore, and was like really like on my path, and I was starting to do things on my own,
mhm,
and finding a community along the way. So that was like part of it too. But since I had the experience of walking, I brought that up to Zach one night when we were out at a bar, and he's like, "I love that idea, but I don't want to walk. Let's ride bikes." And I was like, "You could actually cover more ground in one day of riding a bicycle, even in headwind, than you could walking." So that's what we decided. But I will tell you, when you are trying to organize a 7,000 mile cross country bike ride, and people will be like, "Well, wait a minute, it's not 7,000 miles from coast to coast." You are correct. It is not 7,000 miles coast to coast, and we did not do a straight line. We did a giant W. Like
Wow.
you could, let me see if I can show this to your audience right here because I do have a map. Um,
Oh my God.
yeah, it's pretty stupid.
Well, it's convoluted.
Yeah. We did a giant W, and we were out for 7 months. Um, so when you're like organizing that, and by organizing I mean you're doing fundraisers to raise
Mhm,
money,
mhm,
you're cold calling crisis centers to set up like meetings and stuff
mhm,
like that. And you have to keep calling them to make sure that like they don't forget about you and that
mhm.
everything's planned. um I worked 6 hours a day. I was working in a after school and summer program in a parks and recreation. We both were. I would ride my bike to work, and I would ride my bike home. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
It's probably the doctor. Uh,
That
I
they
like,
can wait.
yeah, they can totally wait. So I had to ride my bike. I would ride my bike to work, which was like about 10 miles away. I would work for 6 hours, and then I would ride my bike home 10 more miles. So yeah, did I get in 20 miles a day? Absolutely. Was it all at once? No. And Arizona, especially Phoenix, is relatively flat. We didn't do like a lot of uh uh like grade training,
Uh-huh.
meaning like going up hills. There's areas where we could have done that. It's just time constraint. I would wake
Mm,
up in the morning, I'm on the phone until I have to leave to go to work. And when I get to work, I got to take a shower, so I got to get there a little bit early. Um, so the first day of riding over 50 miles consecutively was the
mhm.
first day of the bike ride. And it was through San Francisco, which, if
Oh.
you've ever been to San Francisco,
Yes.
is just one hill after another. And it was also in torrential rain.
My
So
God.
completely different from what I'm used to, or what we're used to here in the Valley of the Sun. So there was a lot of growing pains.
Mhm,
Um, I remember that night before we spent the night at the Coast Guard's base, and the Coast Guard in Sausalito, part of their beat was the Golden Gate Bridge,
mm,
and from people that died from jumping off of the bridge,
mm.
um, the part of their responsibility was body retrieval. So they took us in. They were really supportive of what we did, and they were the ones that kind of like set us off when we started. But I remember that night before, it just would not stop raining. We were like in a bunk. The captain gave us his quarters for the evening, and it was just so loud, and it just kept raining. It was hard enough to sleep, and then you just have that like lightning storm. So it was wild. It was
So,
wild.
okay, I
Yeah.
have another question for you. Oh my gosh, what was it? Oh yeah. So when you were showing us that picture of the map, is
Hmm.
that in your book? Is that the book that you were holding up?
Yes.
So if you could hold
2012.
it up again, and there you go. Lift a little bit more. Okay. So you've got the bicycle, you've got is that a dove or a hawk in the middle, and the turtle?
That's the rise symbol.
Okay.
It's a reflection of not only Phoenix, but also a bicycle spoke, a wheel.
Right. Okay.
If you can
Mm-hmm.
get in there. And then
Yeah, I can see that.
the turtle, you're gonna have to read a little bit more to figure out what that one is. That's an
Okay.
Easter
Okay. An
egg.
Easter egg. I love that. Okay, and now I'm still going back to your first day in San Francisco, and with the rain and the hills. I've been to San Francisco, It wasn't
Hmm.
raining, it was misting, and we were walking around a lot. And I live in Colorado, so I'm used to altitude. I hike the mountains. I live in the Rockies, or not in them, but at the foot of the Rockies. So I'm used to climbing up hills, and that was a whole different experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Especially when at the time we didn't have a support vehicle when we first started. We wanted to
Oh,
raise money. A lot of people look at it and they're like, 7,000 miles. You guys rode by side. No, we didn't. That was a team effort. Um, we couldn't miss a date. Other people were rearranging their lives to have
right.
an event with us. So we
Mm-hmm.
had to be there come
Mm-hmm.
hell or high water.
Mm-hmm.
So we wanted to have we wanted to be able to raise enough money to buy a support vehicle, like a van,
Mm-hmm.
hire somebody to drive it,
Mm-hmm.
and then also they could help with a documentary. I was in film school at the time, and I
Wow.
really wanted to do a documentary. So I brought a camera with me, and I was getting as many interviews as possible. But it was really, really difficult when we were riding. So we did most of California by ourselves. We had some help from friends that
Uh-huh.
lived in the area. But once we got back to Phoenix, we took my truck and we
Uh-huh.
used that as a support vehicle. So one day I would drive and Zach would ride, and then the next day he would drive and I would ride.
Uh-huh.
And we did that, and it was important too because I ended up having my first bout of diverticulitis in Taos, in Santa
Oof.
Fe, New Mexico, in Taos. Um, and I couldn't ride for like 7 days or for 10 days because I was on antibiotics, and I wasn't allowed to eat a lot of stuff. And when you're
Wow.
riding like that, you need to have like a lot of calories. So I was dealing with that. And then at one point once we got to like Chapel Hill, North Carolina, Zach was having severe back issues.
Mhm.
And he didn't ride for, uh, I don't think he rode until we got back to Maryland.
Wow.
So,
So
um,
let me ask you this, with all the experiences that you were going through, did you ever once even consider quitting?
oh, you always would do. The second day, yeah, yeah, that's part of it. I think you have to understand. And I've actually talked to there was this one kid that rode his bike across the country, and he wanted to talk to me about it with my experience. He did it without a support vehicle, and he wasn't doing like speaking engagements. He was just going across the
Mhm.
country. And I told him like those first 2 weeks you're going to want to
Mhm.
quit, and just don't.
Mhm.
Every single night you're going to cry yourself to sleep. You might cry yourself to sleep. It's totally normal. You're going to
Mhm.
hate everything about it, and you're going to be like, F this, I don't want to do it. And but just do it. See, I had that experience with the walk.
Mhm.
So I already knew that going in.
Mhm.
But if we were gonna quit, it would have been day two. Because so we started on the northern edge of the Golden Gate Bridge, and we made it. I forgot the town, but it was near Palo Alto.
Okay.
It was a little town near Palo Alto. So we're on the southern side of the bay. And the next day we had to go from there to Santa Fe to Santa Cruz. And we couldn't take the highway because there was no shoulder and there were blind turns.
Oh.
So if we're riding in the bike and if we're riding in the car lane and you got a car coming around a blind turn at 70 miles an hour, they're not going to see us, and we're getting run over. So instead of like taking a short 20-30 mile trek on the highway, we had to go 48 miles over a mountain. And there there were multiple times where we were off our bikes and we were walking them up the hill.
Uh-huh.
Like our bikes are fully loaded at this time.
Oh.
Our legs were shaking from the day before, and we are off-roading it in the middle in like the woods. Like, and I just felt like, dude, how many more hills do we have to go up before we come down? Like, what everything we've come to, it either levels out and we're just going like on a flat grade, and then we hit another hill. Like, when the hell we got to come down to the ocean.
Okay,
Like,
so
when are we going to do this?
that's my next question. Were you guys cussing like drunken sailors the whole time?
I was so mad. I remember yelling at Zach and I said, "This is why I wanted to walk in the first place." But like, I mean, you just kind of like deal with it, and you you do what you can. You eat so much food.
I'll bet.
You eat so much food, and even though it'd probably be better for your body to be eating healthy food, when you're burning that many calories, it doesn't
Mhm.
matter.
Mhm.
Everything is fuel.
Mhm.
So like cookies, pizza, like if we had a host and they like gave us anything to eat, even if it wasn't healthy,
Mhm.
like take it all, even though it's extra weight on the bike, because
Right.
it's gonna be gone soon.
Well, I
So,
remember doing a 14er. I've done 3 14ers. Do you know what they are? 14,000-foot peaks?
oh my God, no.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was saying too. Oh, I was cussing the entire time. So the very first time we did it, and I don't even think we made it to the summit that time, but once we got to the car and we were going to there was a little town not far from it, Idaho Springs, and there's a bar there that we would always go to on the way up to the skiing, the mountains and stuff. What was it? The Buffalo Bar in Idaho Springs. It was a thing. So on the way home, it's like, okay, this is our goal. We're going to stop at the Buffalo Bar. I could not believe how much I ate. I kept ordering more stuff off the menu, but it was like, I need food, and I didn't care what it was. So I
Yeah,
cannot imagine how it felt for you
well,
guys.
the day that we entered New Mexico, we stopped at the one of the last towns in Arizona before you get to the New Mexico Arizona border, called Springerville, and I stopped there and I bought like a plate of wings and I ate them all. And I knew the road to the border because I had
Uh-huh.
walked it 6 years earlier. So I
Mhm.
knew that entire route. I think it was like all the way to, I knew the entire route pretty much from Phoenix
Mhm.
to Albuquerque. Like that's
Mhm.
because we had done like a similar walk. But I knew there was three huge hills that I had to climb from Springerville. So I loaded up and I ate a bunch of like chicken fingers. I ate a bunch of them. And I got back on my bike and I remember doing the bike ride, and like it was just one of those other things. You're going up and down a hill and you're just like you're just so pissed. And when we were done with that, we went to like some weird pizza joint that they had in Springerville. And I remember I bought a pizza and I ate it all to myself. And then I bought another one and I took that to eat the next day. So it was just amazing how many calories your body gets used to eating, and
Mhm.
how much you can consume when you're beating your body up.
So that brings me to another point. Even though you're eating all of that, what you need, you're working so hard and you're burning so many calories. Did you
Hmm.
lose weight along the way or did you just bulk up?
No, I did like a lot of like crunchies and push-ups
Hmm.
every other day, just so that I wasn't just working my legs. And I did slim down. I feel
Hmm.
bad for Sharon because she when oh, I haven't even brought up Sharon. That's an important Easter egg that I just gave away, but I would like to share the story of her that goes back to um my philosophy on experience.
Okay.
But this is to say, my partner that I have right now, when she met me, I was about 35 pounds skinnier. So I like to eat still. Um but yeah, you burn a lot. You burn a lot. It probably takes about 3 months before you start seeing any
Hmm.
change in your body.
Hmm. Did your legs get like so incredibly buff and defined?
Yeah, they were looking pretty good. By the
Mhm.
time we got to New York, they were looking pretty good.
I got to New York. Jeez.
Yeah, and we had like the gnarliest um tan lines too.
Oh, I'll bet. Okay. So was that your final destination, New York?
We ended at an art retreat center called the Chapel of Sacred Mirrors. It's run by artist Alex and Allison Gray.
Uh-huh.
The reason why we chose that, so our our beginning point and our ending point were very symbolic. Even though the Golden Gate Bridge is more of a expression of ingenuity and technology, for
Mhm.
people that have lost loved ones to suicide, it can also be a symbol of death. And there's an
Mhm.
actual documentary called The Bridge that
Mhm.
I had Zach watch before we
Mhm.
left, and it's all about people that have taken their lives by jumping off the
Mhm.
Golden Gate Bridge. Um, so I wanted like the beginning to be like a place that like represented death, but I wanted the place that we ended at to like represent transcendence and
Mhm.
renewal, and that's what the Chapel of Sacred Mirrors is. Alex Gray is a really big believer in art and the power
Mhm.
of art, the power
Mhm.
that art has to heal, not
Mhm.
only as an artist creating it, but as a audience member viewing it.
Mhm.
And so we wanted that place to be our ending point.
Mhm.
Alex, if you look at Alex Gray's art, uh, all of his art, well, the majority of his art that he paints is based on psychedelic experiences that he's had,
Mhm.
uh, LSD, psilocybin mushrooms, DMT, and they're brilliant pieces of art that he creates, just showing like the connection between the physical and the spiritual realms,
Mhm.
that he used in his trips to navigate other frequencies and other planes of existence. Beautiful, beautiful pieces of work. Um, so when we decided that that's where we were going to end, and one of the person that I met there, she was our contact, Sharon Steluto. She's an artist as well. Every single night before we got to a like our destination for the day, like where we had an event, I always called like my contact the night
Mhm.
before. It was always like a 5 or 10 minute conversation. When I was when we were in Manhattan, um, I I called Sharon. She was my contact with the Chapel of Sacred Mirrors. I had been in contact with her since Phoenix, when we got back to Phoenix, and I emailed her once a month. Just, hey, don't forget about us. We're coming. This is the date we're gonna be there. And so I gave her a call like 4 days before we left, and we talked for about an hour.
Mhm.
And I really felt like I had known her for a while. She was very comforting, and she has a really really nice voice. And so when I got off the phone, I Google stalked her, and she also has a very very nice face. And so I met her at the on the final day of the bike ride, and I brought her back to Phoenix with me. Uh, we dated
Wow.
we dated for about a year and a half cross country before one of us made the leap. And I convinced her that you don't have to shovel sunshine. And that's where like it comes to like the idea of like experience, is that like, how do I meet the love of my life 3,000 miles away from me if I don't go on this bike ride?
Mhm.
If my brother doesn't die in the way that he dies, I don't do this bike ride,
Mhm.
and I don't meet Sharon. And
Wow.
I'm not I don't like I'm sitting in our collective creative space. And so it's just one of those things that like something that we deem as negative can lead to something that is positive, just like something we deem as positive can lead to something negative. So rather than getting messed up in the positive and negative, like, it's an
Mhm.
experience. What am I to do with it now?
Mhm. Yeah, I saw the paintbrushes and in the background.
Yeah,
So
she's
that
got some paintings up too.
I see that. Yeah. Wow. So now how long's that been then that you've been together?
2012, we met on September
Wow.
27th, 2012. And I took a month and a half before I got home. I had the truck. Zach and I parted ways. He flew home. He didn't want to stick around with me. I didn't want to stick around with him. We
Yeah, I'm
had a
sure you
lot
guys
of,
had had enough of each other by
yeah,
then.
yeah, yeah, after
Mm.
7 months. And so I zigzagged across the country for about a month and a half. And before I even got home, already bought a ticket to go back and visit her.
Mhm.
So,
Wow.
yeah.
What a story. But I have to ask though, I'm still seeing that map in my head. And just you talking about, starting in Phoenix, the experience in San Francisco, the stupid hills, the blind turns, blah blah blah, all of this stuff that you're going through as you're doing this cross country, and then getting to Manhattan, that had to have been a culture shock.
I'd always wanted to be there. I was kind of disappointed in Philly. The first time I had ever been east of the Mississippi
Mm.
was when I walked across the country with that group
Hmm.
of Christians. And we went as far east as Washington, D.C. And to me, that was like mind blowing. Manhattan, man, if I had money to burn, I would love to at least live 1 year in the city. Even now, like I just love how alive that place is.
Hmm.
Cities to me, like they have their own energy, they have their own character, they have their own personality. And, it's just like a stew, a collective stew of all the different like
Hmm.
ego and conscious that's there and how people are. But like, man, I really fell in love with Manhattan. I'd much rather live in the wilderness, but Manhattan was mind blowing. We didn't have to ride through Manhattan, which I'm grateful for.
That was
We
actually one of my concerns.
yeah, we stayed we rode our bikes up to this village on the west side of the Hudson called Spark Hill. It looks like Sparkle, but it's Sparkill. And we stayed with a another advocate who had
Hmm.
lost his brother and mother to suicide,
Oh.
and he was a writer and he was a television producer.
Mm.
So he drove us into Manhattan, and we stayed with a therapist and her family um, for about 5 days. So we still had
Hmm.
our experience in Manhattan. And not only that, like Vanessa is like one of like the coolest people on the planet. Like our first experience, first two New York City virgins, and we are given like a place. We got to stay rent free. She gave us a key to her apartment where like
Wow.
these are, yeah, and she just was like, go out and experience as much as you possibly
Uh-huh.
can that the city and experience as much as the city has to offer. By that time we were pretty beat up, so we just walked around. Like I'm
Hmm.
kind of like upset with myself that we didn't go to the museum or that
Hmm.
we didn't like go to like the library. Me being a
Hmm.
movie buff, like I'm
Hmm.
shocked that I didn't go see the library just from my experience with Ghostbusters as a child.
Hmm.
But yeah, Manhattan is just its own thing. It's like one of my favorite places
Hmm.
in uh in the States. I
So
love it.
then when did you decide that you were going to write a book? Was this your intention all along, and were you journaling along the way, or once it was over, it was like it's time to just put this in onto paper and share it with the world?
Yeah, once I realized I was corresponding with one of my teachers from film school,
Hmm.
and I was like, I'm just not getting the footage that I think I need. She's like, just be there,
Hmm.
be there, get the lessons that you need to, and but write everything down, like journal as much as you can. If you don't get like the footage, you don't get the footage. Like as much as it would be a great film for people to watch,
Hmm.
I don't think that's why you're there.
Hmm.
So you just don't have everything that you need to make it um to get as much out of it as you would want. And if you're held up on the film side, you're going to miss out a lot on the actual journey,
Hmm.
which was great advice. So I
Hmm.
took it and I, wrote, I journal. I was already journaling like every single
Hmm.
night. That was something that like I didn't do when I walked across the country, and I made sure I was going to do that. But I still recorded interviews with people,
Hmm.
and that actually helped me a lot with the
Hmm.
book because I was able to go back
Hmm.
and listen to those interviews. And I had decided before we even ended the bike ride that I was going to write a book.
Mhm.
And writing the book was like that's its own dragon. I was always, when it came to writing, I was always made fun of as a kid. I always
Mhm.
wanted to write, but people made fun of like my grammar and my spelling, and I just didn't have like a lot of tutelage in that
Mhm.
department. But in film school, I was a really good. I really I was more on the visual side, but I did take a screenwriting class, and
Mhm.
my screenwriting instructor loved my scripts because when you write a script, it's a completely different skill set. You don't write proper English. You write the way
Mhm.
people talk, and then
Mhm.
you give quick descriptions. So it was so much easier for me to do, and I think that's kind of like put a chink in the armor of my
Mhm.
fear of writing. But
Mhm.
as we were riding across the country, I knew that it was going to be a book and not a documentary. So um, when I came back home, I had a lot of people help me. I had some people read it, and I kind of became addicted to it. I love the process of writing. I love words. I There's nothing more satisfying to me artistically when you're struggling with an idea and then you find the right words and put them in the
Mhm.
right place to like create to convey that emotion. Because the thing about emotions, it's crazy, is I seriously feel like there's emotions that exist out there that we
Mhm.
don't have words for, and that's why
Mhm.
poetry exists, you
Mhm.
know. um so yeah, it took, I started writing in 2000, in March 2013 is when I started the outline.
Mhm.
I gave myself a few months to kind of like marinate. um I ended up having a back injury in 2015, which took me away for about a year and a half of writing. That's when I came up with the Inner Monologue podcast. But an Inner Monologue kind of like helped me find my voice.
Mhm.
And I went back to like the book that I was already writing, and I was like 80% done. And I threw it away and I started all over again.
Oh. Ugh. Oh.
I was like, this is good for toilet paper. Um, I mean, I still used a lot of it, a lot of the
Uh-huh.
stuff from there because it was obviously about the bike ride, but it
Mhm.
took me a while to find my voice. So, and that's one thing that even though you're writing, you have to have a voice
Mhm.
that relates to the reader. So,
Mhm.
and what I really was aiming for is that when you sit down and when you sit down and read the book, I want you to feel like you're meeting me for a cup of
Mhm.
coffee and that I'm
Mhm.
telling you the story.
Mhm. It does take a while to find that rhythm or to find the flow.
Yeah, yeah, and especially, and it's crazy. Like I work at a library now. There's so much editing that happened in the stacks. Like
Mhm.
I would be shelving books, and there's like, I got part A of this chapter and I got part B, but I don't have a bridge. And I don't like, I've been working on the bridge for
Mhm.
about a month and I can't find it. And all of a sudden, I'm just shelving books and it comes to me. And so like
Cool.
I take out my phone, I write, I write like a really quick rough draft.
Uh-huh.
It's about a paragraph long. I was like, that's perfect. I email it to myself as soon as I'm off work. I get home, I get through my email, I edit it a little bit more, try to put a little more stank on it, put a little more meat, and then I plug it in, and I'm like, that's perfect. That's a perfect bridge. That's exactly what I needed. And so much of that happened just just being at work, being
Mhm.
surrounded by books.
Well, I think I'm going to go sit in the library then because I'm working on my third book and it's just been like a nightmare. So it's just, I tell people it's almost like coughing up a hairball. And I'm still trying to find my voice. And at some parts, it's like, yeah, that's me coming through. And other parts, it's like, oh, that's, ugh. Yeah.
That is
So,
the best. That is the best metaphor for
Coughing up a
like
hairball.
the first draft is like, because I just picture my dad's cat, like just the struggle that they go through. I'm like, get it out, get it out.
And I don't even have cats. I never have had cats, but I know the feeling. And it's almost like, and I told one of a group of friends, I said, it's like coughing up a hairball with spikes on it. I mean, this thing's getting caught in there. It's not coming out. So, yeah, sometimes you just have to put it away for a while, go do something else. But earlier in the recording, you did mention that there may be another book.
Yeah, I want to do it'll be much shorter, maybe 100 pages, but it's more of um everything that I learned about self-awareness and how it affects mental health
Mhm.
and the
Mm,
importance of cultivating um mental health. And I know that there's a lot of like schools are now integrating mindfulness, but I think it would be really cool to be able to create a curriculum
mhm,
that, is age appropriate from like kindergarten all the way up, that kind of like just gives kids a time, a chance to figure out who they are.
mhm,
um, I know that that would have been useful for me, and one of the libraries that I worked at was actually in a high school.
mhm,
And I became kind of like, they always said like 2:15, it's Thomas time. There was a group of guys that would come in and they would just hang out.
mhm,
And I was like that fun part of their day. But I would be
mhm,
real with them. I would be sarcastic with them. I'd be real with them. I wouldn't sugarcoat stuff.
mhm.
And if they were ever open to listening to any advice that I had, then I would share it. I would never give it unsolicited. But it was just a reminder of how lost I was when I was in high school, and
Mhm.
how difficult um, that 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 age can be. And I think that, it would be important. It would be helpful and beneficial to for everybody, no matter
Mhm.
what their age is, to understand a bit of who they are and why they do the
Well,
things that they do.
once the book is written, and it will be, and once it's published, I want you to contact me. We can have you back on the show because I would love to hear, how that process went and how you're doing, and what's going on now. What are your next plans besides that book?
Well, besides that book, I'm actually writing a different one right now. That one I'm still doing notes on and I'm doing an outline on, but I decided I can go back and forth.
Sure.
I am writing a modern day science fiction about Gnosticism.
About what?
Gnosticism?
Okay.
Gnosticism is it's a spiritual belief that is very intriguing to me. Um, the Matrix is kind of Gnostic. They believe that um, flesh is a trap and that matter is a trap, and that
Wow.
um, our true nature is pure conscious energy,
Hmm.
and that like we're all kind of stuck here,
Hmm.
and we don't belong here. So I'm taking I took a script. It's an anthology. It's like 6 or 7 stories, short stories, and the one that I'm working on right now is a script that I was writing, that I wrote in film school. So I'm just
Okay.
like taking that, but it all has to do with self-awareness. It doesn't matter, like that's going to be the thing. The true science fiction has a lesson to tell. And I
Hmm.
think like even all stories and all films, no matter how commercial, they have a lesson to tell.
Hmm.
So um I'm a big fan of comic books and cinema of
Hmm.
all kinds. My original idea was to do a graphic novel of this, but after I did 2012, I was like, I'm just gonna write this as a short
Hmm.
story and do 7 of them. So um, I'm really excited about that. But every single day, I always add new notes to the follow up to 2012, and I think that's an important book. But it's also fun to play,
Hmm.
and I as much as like 2012 was the book that I needed to write, and the
Hmm.
follow up is a book that I need to write. This Gnostic story is one that I really
Hmm.
want to write, so it's important to follow that.
Okay, now tell us about your podcast.
So I have two podcasts. If you look up on Spotify or iTunes, Rise Philosophy, or I'm sorry, Rise Frequency. Uh, I have just one channel. It's Rise Frequency, but on those I have two different shows. One is Inner Monologue, and they're both labeled differently with different logos. Inner Monologue is more of a conversational interview. I haven't done one of those in a while. It's I've been giving people a platform to promote their stuff. Now
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to promote mine.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still over 300 episodes out there of great material that people can learn from. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it's universal. It's not really beholden to a time period.
Mm-hmm.
And then one that I've been working on, I started 6 months after my mom died, and it's called
Oh.
Stages. And it's just about the stages of grief and stages of life. So
Mm-hmm.
that's just more of an audio diary where
Mm-hmm.
I sit down in here and I turn on the mic and I just let it rip for like 20 minutes and I emote. Sometimes it's funny. Sometimes I don't know, maybe it's a little sad, but I think it's important to share.
When did your mom pass away?
She died May 29th, 2023. So it's been a little bit over a year.
Oh, I'm so sorry. How's your
Yeah.
dad doing?
I never wanted to have children, but now I have a 78-year-old toddler that I take
Mm-hmm.
care of. He's hanging in there. Once we're done with this, I actually have to go over there. We got him like one of those like medical life alert watches
Mm-hmm.
so that we can have somebody have tabs on him if he falls over.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Jeez.
he's an interesting guy, and you know, I'm glad that I still have him. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
grateful to be able to, you know, be there for him. We live close by to each other. We talk to each other every single day,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, he's hanging in there though. I'm trying to convince him to move so that Sharon, my dad, and I can all move back east and live in a place that has four seasons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Seasons are nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they are.
Well, okay. So now, Thomas, how can the listeners get a hold of you? How can they contact you? Um,
The
just
best
give us.
place is go to Rise Phoenix. That has access to everything. RisePhoenix.org.
Mhm.
You have access to the social media. You have access to the podcast. And most importantly, you have access to my book, 2012, A Bicycle Odyssey.
Hey, so now if you can hold it kind of sideways, because it looks like a pretty thick book. So let me see the. Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
thick book. Mm-hmm.
it's about 300 pages of story.
Mm-hmm.
So it's and it's 20 chapters.
Mm-hmm.
But
Nice. Well, congratulations on the book.
the thing I like about it, if you've ever lost someone to suicide, there's a thread in here for you. If
Mm-hmm.
you like the idea of traveling across the country like a beatnik, there's a little bit there's a thread in here for you. If you kind of like you know, Mark Maron said it the best, when I can't explain it, I'll go mystical. Um if you like some woo-woo mystical stuff in there, there's a thread in here for that. And if you are a movie and music nerd, there's definitely a thread in there for that. A lot of pop culture references.
Well, I got to tell you, I haven't heard the word beatnik in a really long time. So that just brought a whole slew of memories to the forefront. So, Thomas, thank you so much for being here and sharing your story with us. It has been an absolute delight.
Thank you, Cheryl. This has been awesome. I appreciate it.
Do you have a final word of wisdom or words of wisdom for the listeners before we sign off?
Know thyself.
Oh, beautiful. Okay. Thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you.
Everybody, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. Oh, please do share this episode with everyone you know. I- I'm sure there are so many of us who have been touched by suicide, and we can really support each other, learn from each other. And I think probably the biggest take on this episode is the self awareness, because self awareness is the key to everything. So make sure that you take care of yourself, take care of each other, and know thyself. And that is the way of the Femininja.